Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to the school board workshop on Tuesday, February 16th, or excuse me, 18th, 2020 at 3:30 p.m. And we are going to have an impact fee presentation from Mr. Gene Bowles. Yes, yes, I know Mr. Bowles.
Good afternoon, board members, Chairwoman Roy, and Superintendent Clark. I'm Suzanne Wynn. I'm the Director of Community Planning and Facilities, and I'd like to introduce Gene Bowles, our consultant that worked on this report, and will present the findings to you and the next steps. And he works as a consultant for us, and he's with Building Livable Communities. Gene?
Thank you very much. Good to see everyone. Give me a moment here to find my slideshow. Can't operate without a slideshow. Okay, we're going to be talking about impact fees. I want to sort of take you should have a copy of the report, essentially what the slide program will do. I think you also have a copy of the slides that I'll be talking about. But the purpose of the slides are to take you through the important aspects of the report and to familiarize you or refamiliarize you with impact fees and how they might be applied here in Alachua County. Impact fees are one-time fees paid for new residential growth proportionate to their share of capital facility needs. They are not a tax. They may look like one, they may act like one, but they're not. They are a fee to offset costs that are generated by the new growth. And it is a one-time fee paid essentially at building permit or certificate of occupancy. And it's only residential. I suspect everyone understands that, but to clarify. What do impact fees cover? In the study we're doing, we propose they would cover school buildings and land. They could also cover relocatables, administrative support facilities, and buses, but that's a much more difficult argument to make and so forth. And as I work through this in consultation with the staff, we believe that it is advisable, and we've structured the report to show impact fees covering the school facility and land. You do see information in the report regarding relocatables and administrative facilities and buses, but that is not factored into the allowable fee calculation. Courts, the impact fees are not created by statute. They are authorized by courts. In effect, that a public body that is impacted by new development can, under prescribed circumstances, exact a fee to cover that cost. There is some legislation regarding impact fees, but it simply sets the rules of the game. It says you have to use localized and recent information, you have to establish a rational nexus, and other rules related to implementation, such you can't charge more than 3% of the cost for administrative structures and so forth. That legislation does not authorize, it does not empower impact fees, it only regulates them to essentially capture what the courts have decreed as essential in impact fees that are imposed. The courts have held, and that we provided in the report, a fairly long description of the history of some of this just for your information on how impact fees for schools have evolved. They are permissible as an exercise of police power. They are not a tax. They cannot exceed a pro rata share of reasonably expected cost. A great deal of the information on the report is designed to establish that pro rata share. They can't create a windfall to existing residents. In other words, you can't do an impact fee to replace capacity that you're building to serve a deficiency, for example. And they must satisfy a dual rational nexus test. Let me see mine. The dual rational nexus, in effect, says that you must demonstrate a reasonable connection between the need for the additional capital facilities and the growth that's generated by new development. And the second part of that is you must use these collected fees to provide the capital facilities that are required by the new development. So you have to show that there's a connection, the nexus, and then you have to demonstrate over time by accounting and so forth that you have used that money to build the new capacity that is required over time from that's caused by that new development. We don't, not house by house or anything of that nature, but for example, the impact fees can't be intermingled with other fees that you have. They must be strictly provided for the provision of new capacity. Now, this study is intended to do one thing. It does not make a recommendation as what the fee should be or so forth. It establishes, however, the maximum allowable impact fee. You will see, let me go back, you will see in the study that when we get to this number, we stop. We'll talk here today about some suggested levels where you might set impact fees, but the study itself does not do that. It effectively says this is the maximum allowable, the maximum number that you can apply. This particular slide actually is what you find in the executive summary and is at the end of the report. I'll take you through the methodology a bit as we get through here, but in effect what we're saying is that you may charge a maximum fee for a single family that's a combination of elementary, middle, and high of $6,924. In case of multifamily, you add those again together, you get $3,369, and I'll give you some explanation how we get to those numbers. That is the maximum fee that can be charged. Any fee less than that is permissible, and that only establishes the maximum number that you could apply per dwelling unit for single family and multifamily. Okay, how do we get to that number? First of all, we develop, and you're familiar with this because you've seen information that we provided you for the purposes, a student generation multiplier. We essentially take, you'll see those numbers there of how many single family homes we have in the inventory, mobile homes, multifamily, 2 units to 9 units, condos, multifamily, miscellaneous. A total of the single family mobile homes and multifamily are aggregated into a single category of single family, about 75,000 homes, and multifamily you see aggregated to about 47,000 units. You have a question?
Mr. Bowles, would you prefer that we wait till the end of the presentation, ask questions, or ask them as we go on?
I don't, let me, if you have a question about the specific slide and so forth, I'd be happy to try to answer it. I think it will make more sense if you,
Okay.
if I can complete.
When you're talking about elementary, middle, and high for a single family home or a multifamily, would you charge all of those if you are not building a high school in the area?
You don't charge them. You don't charge an individual fee for elementary, middle, and high. The collection of the impact fee can be spent on any of those classifications.
Oh, could be, but it doesn't.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you can spend it anywhere in the county. The way we've structured the study. If you could have done it by concurrency service area, for example, but you would never collect enough money to make it. If you said we've collected this into the southwest Alachua concurrency service area, you would probably never collect enough money to build the school.
Yeah, I understand.
And so we are evaluating this on a countywide basis, and by examining the results of the average student generation, we believe that single-family mobile homes and multifamily of 2 units to 9 can be aggregated because they're close, very close in terms of numbers. But you don't apply the fee by elementary, middle, and high. We calculate that way because the student station costs are different.
I see. So it doesn't matter if you're building a high school in that area at all,
That's right.
or a middle school?
You can apply it to any of those classifications, but you see them different because the cost for each one is different.
And you say you can apply this fee anywhere in the county?
Yes,
That
as
you're
long as it's
building
for new capacity.
Yes. Okay. Thank
New
you.
capacity generated by new development.
Yes, thank you.
So I offer this particular slide because it gives you some idea of the inventory of residential units on which these numbers are based. 75,000 we have in the single family, that's single family mobile homes, and then you see the condominiums, multifamily, and miscellaneous. Alachua County, as we all know, has a very large number, a very large proportion of multifamily, understandably because of the university, so that's factored in. Now, we then look at, and match up those addresses for residences with student addresses. And this particular, this was actually done last year, this particular analysis, but it has, as you can see, 21,000 students, combination of elementary, middle, and high, living in single family, that's single family mobile homes and the multifamily that I showed you on the other slide, and another 6,598 students residing in multifamily units. That's a snapshot in time. These numbers would vary from day to day, but this is as you can see, we're talking about large numbers, and averages are developed from this that we believe are very accurate to reflect what each housing type generates in terms of numbers of students per housing type. Those are essentially divided for all practical purposes. How many elementary students do we have living in single-family homes and so forth, to generate a set of student generation multipliers, and we use this for all of the analysis that we do for the concurrency reviews and so forth. But simply to make that a little more sense, take the elementary single family. For every 100 single family homes, we generate about 14 students, elementary students on average. And then we've simply done that same calculation for single family, multifamily for middle, elementary, and high.
Would you explain for me the difference between the 62,473 single family, and you've broken it down into different categories, but when you look at the slide right after that, it has only 21,007 single family, and then the 6,598. What's the
21,000
difference?
are students.
Oh, for students.
The other slide are residential units.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so you have 21,000 students living in elementary and high, actually living in single-family homes. Now, we're
Okay.
including mobile homes and multifamily of 2 units to 9 units as part of the single-family category, because they have a similar student generation multiplier. We've done a composite of those.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So this slide is represents dwelling units. This one represents students. And the combination of putting those together creates this set of student generation multipliers. Now these are, we use these numbers throughout our concurrency review. They've been in place for actually a couple of years since we've evaluated this in the last session.
I have questions, Bo.
Yes.
So the multiplier there, the .14 and the .08, is that then multiplied times the number of units in the single-family mobile homes and multifamily? That's 75,645 units. Would you multiply that by that multiplier?
If you did that number, actually this is actually an addition of the student generation multipliers. You can add these particular ones because of the way it's done. But in effect, that .28 and the .14 would be the total number of students generated at all levels in those in single family and in multifamily.
Single, multi-condo, all of that, so the entire number, 75,645 and the 47,043, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Let me say, if what we have done here, because when we reviewed it, you'll actually see some numbers in the table where these are separated out, where we've done a calculation for the single family, for the mobile home, for the multifamily. And we actually use this for our concurrency reviews. We bring single family mobile homes and multifamily 2 to 9 together because they perform in a fairly similar way, and this represents a composite of all of those. In the case of multifamily, townhomes, condominiums, multifamily, and then miscellaneous, which is things like campgrounds and RV parks, operate in a fairly similar way. And keep in mind, these are hardly precise numbers. They are averages based on a very strong, a large statistical base. But we actually combine them in this way for concurrency reviews, and we've done that here for this application as well. Okay, so let me move from the question of how do we get to these multipliers, so you can, we're looking at the rational nexus. The rational nexus is that a single family unit can be expected to generate a certain number of students. Then it becomes a question of cost per station, of how do we calculate costs. We have, and there's more explanation of this in the report. I'll be happy to try to answer questions if you have them, but I'd like to sort of look at this in general. Construction costs come from estimates made by the Department of Education and are validated by your own staff as being reasonable. The cost per student station for construction costs, that's the facility itself and all of its development associated with it. Elementary is the $23,329, middle $25,193, and high $32,724. We have also looked at land cost, and based on typical appraisals and so forth, I think the number we're using is $100,000 per acre as being typical of cost of land, certainly in urban areas, and in effect calculated a cost per student station, and there you see those together. Then we've added those together to to achieve the 26,629, 28,393, and 37,324. That's the starting point. In other words, the presumption is that is a reasonable basis for the cost per student station for each of these levels and for the land associated with them. Okay. Now, we have to apply then credits to this because, yes.
Middle school land, what will make that cheap?
Pardon?
How did the middle school land not cheap?
It just has to do with the amount of land we have an inventory of the land that's associated with all of the schools.
Yeah.
And that's an average of the land that's.
Seemed like you need more land for a minute.
Well, based on what you have in place and the amount of
Well, I know,
land that
that's
they
why I
have out
asked.
there, yeah, that's the
This
number.
was
that
odd
comes
to
up.
see.
Pardon?
I thought it was odd to see.
Yeah.
I thought it was odd. to see.
Yes, and I wouldn't argue with that. Let me simply say that where we have statistics, we use them and let them fall out where they may. We don't. And essentially what we have is an inventory of the land acres associated with each school, and then and then we use the $100,000 per acre as a means of what the value would be of future schools, and that just happens to be the way it falls out. I agree with you, that looks a little bit odd,
Well,
but it's
then you take into consideration location.
whatever the amount of acreage
I
on
got it.
average associated is where the number comes from.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now, those new residents are going to help pay for capital facilities through other taxes that they pay. So we have to credit that new resident home with those with an estimate of the amount they will contribute to capital facilities through other taxes. There's a state, and this all comes from your 5-year district facilities plan. These are based on numbers that are officially generated and adopted by you. There's an outstanding debt. You're already paying, and there are numbers. There's a table in the report that shows you what that is. These are numbers you've seen from other sources. But the average of that is per student station is $1,203. And so each of those, and so those new residents will continue to contribute to that debt by the debt service line that's in your capital investment tax in your 5-year district facilities plan. So essentially, what we say, they get credit for that share that they will pay through various taxes to offset the existing bonds. In the case of state revenue, it may come through a fairly circuitous route, but each one of those new homes will have some contribution that they'll make through state revenues that you receive. So that's been prorated to, and it's a fairly small amount, but $150 per unit. In the case of the capital improvement tax, you're not spending any of that for capital. That's the the 1.5% or mill levy. You're not spending any of that for capital, for new capital. It's operations and maintenance and a variety of other things. The sales tax is a significant one. And there's data in the report that shows you the projections for sales tax. And that credit is almost $4,000 per unit, $3,844. All of those together provide a credit per student station of $5,197. When we subtract that from the dollars that you saw here, the land cost and the facility cost, we arrive at a net impact fee cost, that is facility cost minus credits, of $21,432 for schools, for elementary, $23,196 for middle, $32,127 for high. That's essentially the amount of value that you can charge impact fees against. So we've adjusted that total dollar by the dollars that these new residents will pay through other taxes, and you will use it for capital. And we arrive at an adjusted number we call net impact fee cost. We then take those student generation multipliers and apply it to those numbers. So that I just used one example here. There's a table in your report. If you will look at table 27, it's right at the back of the report. You will see these numbers applied for all of the housing categories that we use. And in table 27, and then you'll see the summary in table 28, where we've done a composite of the single family and multifamily. The example here that I've simply showed is just to pull one of the examples, and this is in this case high schools. We have a high net impact cost of that $32,127, and in the single family high schools, we have a student generation multiplier of 0.08. In other words, for every 100 dwelling units, single family dwelling units for high, you get 8 students. That then results in a maximum allowable fee for residential high of $25.70, and you will see those numbers.
Well, how do you, we referred to table 28, which I think is in this, right?
We don't have a table
No, it's in this.
27.
Yeah, right, no.
It's in this one. Oh, God, got it.
Oh, that's 28 right here. So where do you get the .08?
From the student generation multiplier table, let me show you what that is.
I'm sorry. Teach me to read fine.
Let me take you back to that.
Fine. All right, I got it.
The student generation multiplier table is 0.08. I'm simply using this by way of illustration of how we get to the number.
I'm
We
just
take the
wondering
net
why you
impact
use
fee
table
cost,
28.
multiply by the student generation multiplier, and that produces the maximum allowable fee for a residential unit in that particular category.
Well, that's how you got the, 2,570.
Yes.
Okay, that's it.
I realize you have to get your arms around this a little bit, but I'm trying to give you.
We're not gonna get tested,
Pardon?
we're not gonna get tested at the end, no.
No, I'm not going to give you a test. I would never do that to the school board. By way of example, then again, this is simply and these actually are the composite numbers that we have shown you in table 28 and in the executive summary as being the key numbers that you would look at in terms of the maximum allowable fee. In the case of single family, the maximum allowable fee for elementary, middle, and high would be a combination of $6,924 per unit. In the case of multifamily, those add up to $33.69. That was the number I showed you at the beginning. Now, this in effect is the purpose of this study, is to give you this number and help you understand how we arrived at that. Is certainly my purpose in this. So let me stop there for a moment and ask if there are questions about how that was calculated or what we're attempting to do. Let me add that this is all based on numbers coming from your records, your 5-year district facilities plan, from information we have regarding the number of students, number of residential units, all of which is brought together specifically for this purpose of calculating this maximum allowable fee. Okay. Now, the impact fee may be established at any level, provided the maximum allowable fee is not exceeded. I have provided, I don't have it in the slides, but on the back page of your report, it's page 22, there's a recent study done by the Tyndall Oliver firm for Orange County that we obtained through, it's a public record essentially of that study done just really a few months ago. That is, gives you a sense of where the school districts are in Florida that use impact fees. You see there the maximum allowable number that would have come from a study like we've just talked about with you. And then also you see the adopted fee and a percentage number of what percent of the maximum allowable is charged. This is just for your information in terms of how this is used around the state and some idea of relationships to the maximum fee that is calculated. Someone asked me that one of them, I forgot which county, that's using 120%. I can't explain that. I won't even try. Because essentially it violates the notion of what I just told you, but I'm sure they had some anomaly in that, but I won't try to explain it.
Be interesting to find out how many of these have, like our sales tax.
I don't know.
That would be interesting,
That's a whole different analysis.
but that goes a long way towards getting that percentage.
I'm sure that has a lot to do with what the maximum number becomes, because if you didn't have the sales tax, remember you had about
Yeah, you gotta get
$3,800, but you may have had a different allocation of how you use. It's a little difficult to read that into just this set of numbers, but I'm sure
No, I
that
mean,
you
it'd be
see
nice if you just had
that dramatic differences in some of these are very likely related to what other revenues they have and just how they've allocated those dollars. They can vary quite a bit.
that. Sure.
Some of them are the maximum fee is up in the range of $10,000 per unit, but I don't know the detail. This is a survey that was done by another firm. And I presume that they did that by contact with each or some kind of research of each district that was had imposed impact fees. Okay. Now, this slide shows you the maximum allowable that I just showed you. The $6,900 for single family, multifamily is $3,369. The study doesn't give you a recommended fee. I simply, for discussion purposes, suggested that you might use a 75% of the maximum allowable, which would produce about $5,200 per unit for single family, and about $2,500 for multifamily if you applied that same ratio. That's fairly close to the average or median that you find around the state. That's the basis I offered. That basis I offered it to you as a suggestion, but that's the rationale for it. It's the 75%, roughly 75% of the maximum, and it's fairly similar to the percentage that other jurisdictions offer. Certainly not all of them, but you can see how they vary. Again, only a suggestion as to where you might set the fee for your discussion purposes.
So the fee, you're just staying at the 75%, since that's the majority of the counties that have.
You don't have to use that
No, I'm
rationale.
asking just what's the basis of your recommendation?
That's the basis of that number. It's 75%, and that's roughly what the average or median is around the state.
The average.
Sorry.
You said the median or the average?
Well, I think it's
It's the average as well.
the average is 53.21, representing 75% of the average allowable fee. It's a preamble information on that back page. There's nothing magic about that. It's simply an idea of where the other jurisdictions have come down in the sense of where they establish the fees. Okay, so if you choose to move forward, what I can go through with you are the steps that would be required for that. First one would be a resolution by this board. That is then followed up by educational facility impact fee ordinance that is adopted by the county, and then interlocal agreements with local governments to collect the fee. Because these impact fees are collected at building permit stage or certificate auction, but at the time construction is taking place, the local governments must in fact collect the fee. And so the purpose of these, you establish the fees by resolution. The county would adopt an impact fee ordinance, and there would be a local agreement with the county and other local governments to collect the fee and transmit it to you.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to when you were here before. We can implement impact fees specific parts of our county.
No.
I could have sworn you said that before, maybe. I was under the wrong assumption.
You've never had impact fee.
No, no. When you came to us before, I was under the assumption that you could, because, you know, impact fees affect different areas differently.
We don't make a distinction in this study between one part of the county versus the other. We could.
Well,
We have the data.
that was my understanding. Obviously, my understanding was wrong.
I think you're probably mixing it up with concurrency. We use analysis by concurrency service areas, and we have 3 elementary concurrency service areas, and I think it's 6.
Well, my assumption was for impact.
But we don't do that for impact.
I got it.
Yeah.
So, like the county, I think as part of their comp plan, does have that, some language in there, if I'm recalling correctly from our view, that they can waive fees for an area that they're trying to redevelop. Because I have the same question that Dr. Paulson has. Are there exemptions or ways of, if there's an economically depressed area that's not causing strain on the capacity of the district, that we could choose to have it written as part of the resolution that you would exempt that particular area? Are you saying that's not allowable?
No.
You know you're not saying that, or no, you can't do that?
No, here's why. I'm saying it fairly emphatically because it's, unless you're willing to pay the fee for them. Here's the issue. This is not a tax. It is an impact fee based on a rational nexus. If you could show that that the depressed area generated fewer children, that would be a different situation. But if you are simply exempting them for some other public purpose, you undercut the basic principle which impact fees are based. Now, I empathize with that very much. Affordable housing is a perfectly good example. But in reality, affordable housing, smaller homes and so forth, tend to generate more students per bedroom. I don't have the proof of that, but than an 8-bedroom home would be. I had arguments made, well, why don't we charge by the bedroom? Well, you can't establish the nexus of that in terms of the number of students generated. Now, does that mean you don't give consideration to those things? Certainly you can, but I want you to be aware that it's that rational nexus that drives the impact fee. Now, the state law does suggest that you can provide some exemptions for affordable housing, and that's something that could be discussed, and there may be other bases on which you could do it, but you need to recognize that it's that rational nexus, the connection between the student generation and the fee that that underpins the fundamental impact fee concept.
So I want you to repeat what you said about the state allowing something, because I want to make sure I get it in my notes.
There's a provision in the state law for impact fees that does recognize that you may provide some exemption for affordable housing. But that generally means that you have an affordable housing program that is recognized through there's some criteria for what housing units apply and what the income levels have to be. So, but there is some opportunity for exception there if you chose to use it. And it's while it does undercut the impact fee standard that I just gave you, it has been recognized as an acceptable.
So let me be clear.
Example.
If we implement impact fees, it has to be countywide.
Doesn't have to be, but it's to your benefit to do it countywide. Because otherwise you don't collect enough money
I understand.
to make
I
the
just-
improvement.
Well, I guess the question that I'm having is that if part of the county where we're having the most growth and then where there are fewer student seats, that's the concern I have. The eastern part of the county where there's excess capacity isn't, if they build over there and 100 students are generated by a new subdivision, walking distance to, say, Lake Forest, that school is not gonna be strained, and the district is not gonna have to put a portal out there or consider adding new classroom seats, because the capacity already exists in that particular area.
That's right. So
That's totally different from a development that's happening near the golf course out on Newberry Road.
I understand
Or on
that.
Harper Road. So that's why, I guess that's where the basis of my questions are coming from, and that's what I'm trying to get to see.
What I would say is that capacity anywhere in the school district benefits all of the school districts. You, for example, are building the new Oakmont School, because that's where the growth has been, that's where it can easily be demonstrated that the need is. But that will benefit school districts that are further back into Gainesville and so forth, because you have the ability to better use your facilities. The way this is structured, it doesn't make that geographic distinction for impact fees. You could do that if you, but generally what we find is that a district-wide approach for impact fees, which means you collect it and you spend it district-wide, is the most efficient and best use of those fees. Because more than likely you will use the fees to augment other resources and to essentially pay for the major capacity improvements.
What can we use again for impact fees?
Pardon?
Impact fees can be used for construction, right?
For the construction of school facilities,
Yeah,
and we've said, and also for land.
Land, okay, like they said, so that's all.
Well, the way we have structured this, potentially you could use it for relocatables for buses and for administrative facilities, but we don't generally recommend that, because those are much harder to, I think, sell that in the sense of making sense to people, as well as it's a complicating factor for which you don't get a lot of benefit from.
Maybe it's where it's almost like the place, the biggest argument then is the sprawl west, right? At least that's what I hear in the papers. And the complaint is we're sprawling west, our community. So that's where where the impact fees would go.
Well, the impact fees would go where you
Where you need them.
determine they would go.
Yeah, right. Well, what I'm saying is, I'm just trying to, in my own mind, reconcile, because then everybody's paying the same impact fee. And have construction for homes and apartments.
Well, it's because of the way the analysis is done, and we've always used, and this is a fairly general.
Just
Were you
want to be
directed
clear.
by staff to do the analysis that way, so that you only do a county-wide versus looking at where the sprawl is going, the direction that the county is? You know, instead of, because an example that I just used, in the eastern part of the county, we don't have the issue of there being a strain on our system. I mean, that's my understanding. The strain is in the western quadrant of the
That's
county.
correct.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out what was the driving force for you to choose to do it countywide versus in the area where we're having the issue, the school capacity issue? Were you directed to do it that way? Was that your professional judgment? What was the basis?
Well, it's my professional judgment that you're best served by a district-wide approach. You can always, those are valid arguments and valid understanding. The key is that you've got to establish the rational nexus. Now, if you were going to have a impact fee based on concurrency service areas or something else, you would have to analyze it that way. Now, we have the ability to do that. But also, let me point out that most of the impact fee, if most of the growth is in the western part of the county, that's where most of the impact fees will be paid.
Well, I guess I don't want to hamstring because affordable housing has come up, and that was a question that I had on my list to ask. So I guess now my next question, aside, I'm going to put a pin in the affordable housing. The concurrency service areas was reduced from 9 to 3, and I stood where you were there, and I was thinking any development in the areas would always be in concurrency because the 3 districts touch. concurrency areas touch. So we kind of like hamstrung ourselves, in my understanding now, of approving developments. When they come to you, you pretty much say everything is in concurrency, that there's capacity, because either in that district or the one next to it. So in the one that contains the eastern schools, there's space there, but as we're not transporting kids there, so the western schools are
Getting it.
bulging. So I'm trying to figure out like how are we gonna deal with that, because concurrency, we're gonna be approving everything, you're gonna, when they send.
It's supposed to. If you, the idea of concurrency is a tool to match growth in the schools with growth in the community. If you are stopping development, you've failed.
And I don't wanna stop development, I just want development to cover its own cost. So I think by reducing the number of areas, we've kind of artificially made it seem like the eastern schools can absorb that, or will absorb that, when that's not what's happening. And then we're saying that, oh, we can use these funds countywide, when there's not gonna be any school capacity built in the east, because there's no student, the students that's not where the development is. We're getting all the growth in the western part. So I'm just trying to figure out how do we not hamstring that particular area, and then how do we make sure that in the area where that the growth is occurring, that they really are paying their fair share.
Let me say, where you place capacity is entirely your discretion in terms of where the dollars are spent and where the capacity is provided. I'd also make note is that when you adopted the sales tax last year, the staff you have a strategic plan which includes enhanced capacity in a whole number of schools, not just new schools, but in a variety of schools throughout the county. And that's documented in some of the current information. So there is an effort I believe, being made to appropriately allocate capacity where it's most needed. Yes.
Well, I'm not going with the school. To me, it's discouraging growth in the east.
Discouraging.
Because, people there's an argument, they want new construction in the east side of the county. This is a discouragement, because they're paying for that extra amount. Am I wrong? Everybody's paying the same amount for new construction, right?
Yes, a single-family home in the eastern part of the county would pay the same.
And the argument I've always heard is you have impact fees to pay for
Growth should pay
for the
itself.
growth. The people are paying for the growth. But in my mind, it's simple, is that not every, the people that are getting the growth, they're paying, but not all of it. You got people that are not getting benefit from it, that are paying for it in their new construction. Now, I'm just saying that, just to throw it out, I'm not telling you how. When I make a decision, I want to know exactly everything. I'm clear in my decision.
These are all difficult questions. I understand where you're saying. I think it's important to recognize that an impact fee is based on the rational nexus, and it's, in my judgment, best applied countywide. How you then spend it and how it's in use is a different process. But it is based on revenues that are generated where the growth is highest, because that's where you get the largest.
But that's where probably they're going to be spent too. Right?
Say again.
Probably the impact fees will be spent where the growth is.
That's where you will get the most, because you're getting the most growth.
Okay, well, I don't know if there's in other words, you have a scale. What can you do? You got, again, clear, so you can have construction and other things. What are they that can make it equitable? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be hard.
No, I understand. These are very valid questions. There are not easy answers to those kinds of things, and I can try to expand on it a little bit. But I think.
Well, I wanted to ask you this happened previous to me coming here, where we changed the concurrency service areas.
Yes.
I wanted you to just explain a little bit that was not, we did that to match what the state had done. That wasn't driven by us, that was driven by the state. So if we had capacity in the district, if you can explain that a little bit. Previous to making these changes, we had to deny development if a concurrency service area or concurrency service area right next to that service area did not have capacity. But then the state changed.
Well, the state law in 2011 essentially said we want to go back to a district-wide level of service.
Yes.
It left us the option of continuing with concurrency service areas, but it clearly emphasized a preference to district-wide. But the reason that we needed to change the elementary was because we had 9 elementary concurrency service areas. When we did that in, was it 2008, we were talking about 6 elementary schools based on the projection needed on the west side of the west urban area and the west side of Gainesville. You built one, and now you're building the second one. What's happened is that you had the concurrency service areas were so small that Archer, for example, was out of capacity, and there was no way to provide that. So we consolidated those so that you were drawing from a larger pool of capacity for a larger area. Otherwise, we would have been in a situation of having to sort of artificially turn down development in some of the concurrency services. The Archer is the most obvious one because it's isolated in the southwest corner of the county.
Concurrency is not what I'm having a problem.
So that,
All right. I mean, Dr. Paulson and you are talking and talking
I'm
and
sorry,
talking.
it's I was out of.
Lynette has been, Dr. McNeil has been waiting, so she has a question too.
I almost lost my question. It was between Mrs. Certain and Dr. Paulson with the concurrency, but when we moved from 9 to 3, is there any way to change that at this point, or it would not be feasible to increase back with concurrency? And the reason I ask that is because when you made the statement that the impact fees would apply to everyone, but it would be left up the decision as to the western portion of the school system being given the rights to do whatever. Nothing is going to happen, I don't see it, if we voted into what you're suggesting for the schools over here, even though they have capacity. But I still could not vote for it if all of the western population, all of the growth area would get everything and nothing over on this side. Am I saying it correctly, or tell me if I'm wrong?
well, I don't want to say you're wrong.
Well, no,
Let
tell me
try to
if
clarify.
I misunderstood.
I think need to somewhat separate the impact fee from concurrency service areas and from how you decide to build capacity. The impact fee is based on a district-wide on the basic premise that the rational nexus is calculated district-wide. In other words, the generation are district-wide numbers, and that any capacity in the district is benefiting the entire district. But then the
Stop
question
right there. You say any what?
that any increase in capacity is benefiting the entire district in terms of this matching of development with new capacity, because you have the ability to redistrict, you have the ability to put capacity where you need it. That's not affected at all by the impact fee itself. The impact fee does not dictate where you would spend the money. It simply says that you collect it district-wide, that's based on a rational nexus, and you spend it to meet capacity needs for that new development. It doesn't, in that particular structure of the model, there is no distinction between the east side of the county versus the west side of the county in the collection of the fee.
That's the
Now,
problem,
the distinction is when you decide to make an improvement, then you, of course, have the authority in your discretion on where you make those capacity improvements. This simply becomes a funds which you have, which increase your ability and your ability to make those capacity improvements, because it's supplemented other taxes and other funds revenues you have.
So, Mr. Bowles, finally, I know you have nothing to do with rezoning, but it seems like a rezoning issue arises in this situation that we face ourselves with, no?
I'm
Oh,
not sure I
yes.
quite follow.
if we have capacity at schools only on this side and all of the growth is western, at some point in time, either we're gonna close all these schools or we're gonna do something different in bringing children into our schools where we have capacity. I don't know if anyone is following me on this up here, or if you are the superintendent. Somebody must understand what I'm saying.
I understand what you're saying. I think that you're probably expecting impact fees to do more than they can do. It's simply a revenue source that you can utilize that is based on the rules that I've talked about. Now, as I say, you could restructure the study to have smaller areas and so forth, but what we've typically found is that isn't beneficial because it now restricts you in having to spend these dollars in a very, very small area, and that tends to dictate what you do much more than a district-wide approach would do. That would affect your flexibility to use monies much more than a district-wide approach would do. Do you understand what I'm?
I'll come back. I see Mrs. Roy with her light on.
Listen, if we did this analysis on the, say, the 3 concurrency service areas that for elementary, we're talking about, and we have the information to do that, but that now means that everything you collect in the west side has to go to the west side, and everything you collected in the east side has to go to the east side. Now that might be a lower number and so forth, but it becomes a much more complex kind of analysis that I believe restricts your flexibility in using the funds.
Okay. Mr. Platt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. According to that last chart that was done for Orange County by another firm, there are 26 districts that use impact fees, and if my math is correct, that means 41 do not. If we could, and I don't expect you to have this information absolutely in front of you, but just based on your knowledge of how this has worked and how this works throughout Florida, do we have, when you have impact fees, is the cost absorbed so much by the builder, by the developer, or is it indeed passed on to the buyer or to the tenant? And I just think that that's something that isn't has to be considered. In my opinion, doesn't mean it's a game stopper at all. But what's been your experience with that?
My experience is that if it's collected at the right time, and I recommend that it's collected at certificate of occupancy. Now, it's either going to be collected there at a building permit or certificate of occupancy, which is 3-4 months later, essentially. I recommend certificate of occupancy. Now, I don't know whether that fits in with the way the county works and so forth. That's something you have to look at. The reason for that is because then it's amortized into the cost of the home. The developer is not having to finance that up front. And I'm speaking from direct experience. When I was director of planning in Hillsborough County, we had a lot of experience with impact fees. And I can tell you that that's a very real question. Where do you collect the impact fee? And in the case of school impact fees, if they're collected certificate of occupancy, they will be generally amortized into the mortgage. That's why it affects affordable housing in an adverse way. But you're not really generally talking about, what I would also tell you is where I've seen impact fees applied is they don't have any significant effect on development. They don't retard development or impede it in any particular way. You're talking about maybe $25 a month in your, that $5,000 would do in a typical 30-year mortgage. It's not a huge number.
Right.
But it is important that it is, in fact, it's even required that you collect an impact fee when the impact is created. You couldn't do it, for example, when they put a subdivision lot on, because that hasn't created the impact. That's why I recommend that it's collected at a certificate of occupancy and no earlier than building permit. And that's the same, in effect, the structure. It doesn't depend on subdivision. It's not the developer, it's the home builder that's affected more than the subdivision development. Many times are the same people, but that's a very valid point of when it's collected.
And my other concern has already been mentioned by two other board members, but how can we mitigate the effect or on affordable housing? And I think Alachua County is not unique
No, it's not.
in having a real difficulty in providing affordable housing. Tomorrow night I'm sure at a brisk Alachua County Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and this always is a paramount concern, and I just, I want to make sure that any direction that we go, at the very least, we can't negatively affect availability of affordable housing. So, I don't know if you have any comment on that, or?
Well, the exemption to affordable housing that you will typically find in these types of concepts recognize, first you have to establish that the cost of the home is is affordable based on federal guidelines there. So it's different from different regions, but essentially. And then at the time of purchase, that the person buying it is low income. If you can do that, then you can set up a procedure by which that would be exempt from the fee. There are some ordinances that do that, and it's recognized in the state statutes as being an acceptable exemption.
And when we say ordinance, that would be really that would be under the auspices of either municipality
It would
or
be the county. The county would adopt the ordinance countywide.
Okay.
And that provision would be in the countywide ordinance to allow a process by which affordable housing could be established. And it, as I say, it has two parts to it. It's that you have to establish that the home itself meets the requirements, and then the buyer also meets low income requirements.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Bowles, I think what everybody up here is, wrestling with and, worried about is the fact that people on the east side would be paying impact fees for a new home when they didn't receive any of the benefits from that. And you keep saying it's to the benefit of the district to collect the fees. What I'm assuming that means is that the impact fees will supplement some of the budget that we already have for construction costs. It will mitigate some of those costs by having the impact fee pay for the new, or for a portion of the student station in the areas of development. And so that would free up more money that can be used district-wide for construction, possibly on the east side.
Yeah.
Is that what you
Yes.
meant? Yeah,
It simply enlarges your pool of revenue
yeah,
that is actually unrestricted in terms of where you spend it.
right. You keep saying, that it's up to us to decide where the money is spent, but the money has to be spent where new development, It's taking
Yes, of course,
place.
if you're meeting capacity needs, it has to be
Yeah.
spent for new capacity.
yeah,
You can't use it for operation or for anything else.
yeah, right.
And so, but it would depend, but you may be adding some capacity in other parts of the county.
Of
but-
course,
yeah.
of course, and, we would have more money to spend in general. And I liked what you just said about an exemption for low-income housing. But of course, that wouldn't cover everyone.
No, and in fact, it covers a very small percentage
Yeah.
of people. The reality of it is.
So the housing in the east isn't necessarily low income.
No,
No,
not
so they would
necessarily.
pay it anyway.
Exactly.
They can't be exempted, is that right?
Well, it would.
I mean, you
if
said low income.
Follow the model I just described to you, any housing that met that criteria and it was then purchased, met the criteria of the value of the home, the cost of the home.
Yeah.
And these are federal guidelines that you can adopt or reference. And then you have to show that it's actually purchased by someone who is in a low income or very low income category. I won't try to get into there's some details with all of that, but essentially that's a fairly small percentage
Okay,
of people.
Okay.
I think probably anywhere in the county you'd find that is not going to be a large number of applications that would use that, but it is possible that could be a benefit.
okay, thank you.
I do. So I guess the problem that I'm having and that I'm really wanting there to be a different basis for the analysis is, I think we've calculated a composite rate that encompasses growth for the whole part of the county, when all of us up here acknowledging that all the growth is west, and those concurrency areas are out there. So to me, I would have rather have seen both analysis of having a county-wide fee, one that could be used county-wide, which to me, it doesn't make sense that we would be up here entertaining adding capacity in the east when we have additional space over there already, when the capacity we need would be in the west. So I would prefer to see, I would have liked to have seen two analyses done, the way you've done it, and I would like to see it as well where it would be done just on a restricted basis, where it would be in those areas where we would have to add extra capacity. Right now, I'm having a hard time of saying we adopt a fee where everyone in this county would pay the same amount when all residential units in the county are not creating the same impact on the system. So to me, I think we need to have more information before we do this. I think there needs to be a fee, but I just don't think it should be equal. It should not be the same amount for each residential unit in the entire county, because Heartwood subdivision over there, however many houses it's going to be, is not going to have an impact on the schools that are within its school zoning area. Williams, Lincoln, and Eastside, it's not going to have that type of strain. You take the subdivision that's out, I can't even, Gloria's Way, for example, on Parker Road. It's going to have a different impact on the schools that it potentially would be those children would be zoned to. But if we build a unit in Heartwood, we're saying that they would pay the $60-some hundred, the same as would be paid by a unit in Gloria's Way. And that's just, to me, doesn't seem to be right. That's not fitting into the model.
But, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, what would be the difference in terms of students generated? I don't
They
know.
would generate the same number of students, but the students that are generated, where they would now go to school, there's space over there in the east. In Heartwood, over there, there's space at Williams, Lincoln, Eastside. But over here, the homes that are being built out here off of Parker Road and the Jonesville area and Alachua, on that 241, 143rd Street, they're creating a different type of impact on our school system than what a house in the east is.
Well, from the standpoint of, keep in mind, I'm not really trying to be argumentative, I'm just trying to clarify what the impact fee does. The rational nexus means how many students does that home generate, regardless of anything else on average. And while I understand the argument you're making is that the students generated on the east side already have capacity, that's not what it's looking at. It's essentially saying that if that student is generated and it's a new student, it's going to have a student station somewhere.
Is there only one rational nexus? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you would have to do that. If you're going to use smaller areas, you have to make the same analysis to get to the relationship between, and I don't know what it would produce. The smaller the area that you're looking at, the less reliable the numbers are in terms of an average. But would I get a different student if I do the analysis just for a specific area on the east side? Would I get a different student generation multiplier for residential that I would get on the west side. I might, but I'd be very surprised that it was dramatically different. And you can't really look at, well, but the capacity isn't there. You have to look at what did that residential unit generate in terms of new students for the school, by whatever area you are talking about. And one of the points I was reckoning, when you start to get down to individual neighborhoods, you really are on very shaky ground in terms of being able to
No, I'm just
substantiate.
talking about even the concurrency service area. I could not find my book from the last time you bought that here, so I'm at a disadvantage to not be able to show you, to be able to reference the map myself.
Right.
But from my knowledge of the county and where I'm driving around, I'm thinking what would come down the pipeline through your office to say it meets concurrency or not, and what the students that will be generated by it. It has a different impact on our system than what the development that's happening in the sprawling out west.
Well, there's no question. We have data, and actually you'll see it in your annual report, which you see every year. This year, essentially, the southwest Alachua County Concurrency Service Area is out of capacity until Oakmont is opened up, until in 2 years or 3 years. The other two concurrency services have capacity. They'll be in a positive situation for about 10 years. And once you build Oakmont, that'll be generally in compliance or have capacity for about 10 years. Then you're going to have to be looking at where the next element, and you'll be doing that sooner than that. But you're actually approaching the southwest area, the western part, is at its capacity. That'll be alleviated with Oakmont, but it will be back in the same situation within a few years. And the other areas also are reaching, in terms of elementary, reaching near that capacity. Now you have much more capacity in elementary, middle, and high projected over the next number of years. The difficulty I think in the methodology for impact fees is that how you structure that is, you could structure it in a way that you didn't, if you in effect said, we're not going to build anything on the east side, therefore we have no impact fee to charge. We won't charge an impact fee because we're not going to build anything. But now you're restricted where you could never use an impact fee for that purpose on the east side. You would have to, do you understand the distinction I'm making? If we carved it out and said, let's do this analysis based on 3 elementary concurrency service areas, and you decided we're not building any capacity on the east side, you could make it 0.
Well, the thing is, that's the path I would almost be willing to take, and then we come back and we can revisit this. It's not like this is cut in stone that it can't.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Changed, but right now I just have, to me, I guess, to have only one basis of your analysis for us not to be able to have that information to be able to make that type of decision based on information just on gut feelings, versus just making it on a gut feeling. I'm not saying there's not going to be any development in the east, but for those of us who've been here for a while, there has not been. There's been a whole bunch of talk. There has not been a whole lot of development over there. So it's just to impose that. It's like we're actually, the eastern part of where there's not any growth is subsidizing the areas where there is growth, because that means we're assessing a lesser amount. The fee is less.
Yeah, I understand.
So that's the problem that I'm having. So that's the reason why I keep kind of trying to say, is there another basis for the analysis? You've only brought us one analysis back, so.
The reason I brought that to you is because in my experience with impact fees, and also discussions and consultation with a lot of people who deal with impact fees, the larger you can draw the district, the better you are with impact fees, because you have greater flexibility. I don't want for a moment to say that you can't draw it differently, but you will then restrict yourself substantially in terms of how you use your fees. And I've seen this both in transportation and schools. If you draw the line, the areas too small, you never collect enough impact fee to make a significant difference to build a school. And if you don't spend them, you have to give them back in 10 years. And so that you never want to be in that situation. No reason you would be. But that's largely why it's done that way. But another is you get a much larger statistical base, so the rational nexus is stronger. with a lot of, like 78,000 residences compared to the 26,000 students. No, I'm not, I'm just trying to, by way of explanation, to say how that was arrived at, why we did it that way.
Okay, Dr. Paulson.
All right. Now, impact fees are for any kind of construction, right? Not just houses. You gotta, people gotta pay impact fees for what? For businesses they do?
No.
No, it's just a house, okay.
Only for a new residence one time.
Yeah, that's fine, okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is, what I'm saying is, you're discouraging, instead of encouraging people to build on the east side, and if you didn't have impact fees, that might be an encouragement not to build it. Maybe you say it's so insignificant, it wouldn't make any difference. But that way, then, we're trying something to encourage building on the center to east side of the county. That's what I'm looking at. Does that make sense?
It does, but it's not your mission to do that. Now, I understand what you're saying.
My mission is to live in this district, and if people have kids in it, and how we help them help them.
What I'm trying to argue is that the question of directing growth is not your responsibility as a school district. Yours is to educate kids. And I understand what, and
I understand.
there's not a big difference necessarily between those two.
But we might see that differently.
Well, yeah, but what I'm trying to say, for example, one of the issues that we get into in terms of affordable housing, even though I completely agree with the need to,
Well, just a nice subdivision.
yeah, what I'm saying is that when I was saying I completely agree with the need for affordable housing, but there's nothing in the mission of the school district that says that you can fund that. That's my point. So you have to be careful that you
We're
don't.
encouraging it.
Well,
Because one of our problems is everybody keeps moving west.
Yeah.
Right?
The only
That
way.
affects us, doesn't
The
it?
only way that you could get to where you're talking about would be to restructure the impact fee so that it distinguished geographic areas, and then see where that fell in terms of of where it would be and how you would use that.
Thanks for being so patient.
No,
I would just like to make a suggestion, because what I'm hearing is the major concern is with affordable housing. And I'm wondering if we could take the approach, and I'm hearing Jean say it's best to do district-wide for flexibility and, for the way we use the funds. Would it be worthwhile for Jean to investigate how other counties have approached affordable housing? Because I heard there is the potential to exempt affordable housing from these fees. It's just the mechanism by which you do it. Is that correct?
yes, but yeah, I'm not. What I'm saying is that my opinion about the affordable housing provisions I just talked about is it will affect very, very few people.
Yeah.
And as a solution to the issue you're talking about, it's not. Now, it may address, I'm not saying don't do it, it would address some usage, but generally speaking, the school districts that I've talked to about that is they have those provisions, but they're never utilized, or rarely ever utilized. I don't think that's the answer to the issue that you're talking about promoting or trying to, or at least not discouraging development on each side. I think you would have to do that through some kind of a drawing of boundaries and treating the impact fee differently. I mean, you can set, if we had, for example, let me give you, now I've just been working with the impact fee with Santa Rosa County, which is out in the Panhandle. Well, it has a mainland area separated by the bay, and it has the south part. They're about equal size. Well, you've got 6 miles of water, and we could have said, in that one, we could have established an impact fee for the south end and for the north end very logically. We use it Kent district-wide, but you could have done that. So you have
The south end's rich and the north end's not.
Well, it's much different. South is
There,
also.
I mean, there are east and west, they're north and
They have
south.
much different student interaction, multipliers, this kind of thing. But you would have to create some kind of a geographic distinction and then establish a different fee for each of those areas, both in terms of how much it costs, how much you were spending, as well as what the student interaction multipliers were and so forth. That's possible, but it's again, and I certainly have no difficulty in if you choose to do that, pursuing that, but it is a different kind of analysis, and I don't know exactly what it would
Mr. Hyatt?
It seems to me, based on what we've heard today, an advantage of having the county-wide approach is it's gonna be very difficult where to draw lines. You're gonna say that, okay, this particular spot, well, you know what? Impact fees will not be in effect here. Well, who's drawing that line, and what block do we draw it on, what street? And also, it gets equally sticky if we're looking at the area most affected by growth and to the west. Where is that line drawn where, okay, this is going to be the, this is where the impact fees will be in effect. I'm just pointing out that in my estimation, it's a little bit easier to say we'd like to do this than to actually implement it. How would you respond to that?
Well, you're exactly right. The first question would be, where do you draw the line to begin an analysis or to apply that? You can do that, but there has to be some rationale on which we would do that.
And again, when we get to impact, the word impact, this isn't, it is by definition dealing with where we are impacted, where the school district is impacted. So, I don't know, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
If I may, thank you. What we're really talking about is land use policy and development policies, which the school board does not do. But the city and the county have access to SHIP funds, they have access to community development block grant funds, and they could make the development decision to say that on the east side, they'll provide whatever our number is, $7,000, to defray the impact of that fee on the owner. We don't have access to those funds, but the city and county government, and this is basically, when you look at where the development occurs, in our experience with the SPAC program, to my mind, most of that is the county's land use policies. So if you look at the whole eastern side of the county, and we couldn't identify one 25-acre site on which we could build a school consistent with those policies, that's land use. So what I'm suggesting to you is that, given the concern, perhaps we need to say to the city and the county, and you know, they've just reached this agreement on how they're going to use CRA funds on the eastern side. I think it's $70 million. That perhaps an allocation of that could be set aside for the purpose of mitigating the impact of school impact fees on the eastern side. And so then you can make the decision to do it countywide, which gives us ourselves flexibility, but we can't do anything about affordable housing. Those are under the jurisdiction of the cities and the counties and their land use policies. And they have resources that specifically are there to address the issue of affordable housing. So I don't know if we do that by saying to the county, we'd like you to designate some of these CRA funds, come up with a policy to mitigate the impact, because we have a concern on how it will affect folks' development and home ownership on the east side. But I think that could be a solution to what you're wrestling with, because we, based on our financing, we don't have a solution to that. But there are funds, if we're looking at this, I mean, the county wanted to come over and, you know, encourage us to do this, then they have the resources to mitigate the concern that you have. And that might be an approach where we could follow Dr. Bowles' recommendations, but still address the concern I'm hearing from the board in terms of the impact on the east side and that fee.
That's good. Okay, I'd like to speak and then I'll give you a chance. I remember an earlier report we got where a University of Florida professor articulated that problem of its effect, impact fees' effect on low-income housing. But I think that for one, I'm worried about low-income housing, but I'm worried about all housing, not just low-income housing. I mean, there's a lot of people buying in the east side that are not low-income. But here's what I'm thinking. If we don't get impact fees, if we don't vote for impact fees, we have less money in the county to build, to expand, to create new capacity. We have less money to do it. Now, even if we are spending the precise fees which come in from impact fees on the west side, we're still addressing the need for capacity on the east side when it is necessary to increase capacity. So, it makes more sense to me to do what you're suggesting. And of course, I like Mr. White's suggestion about getting the county to subsidize the people on the east side that are paying impact fees. I like that. But, and the other thing I wanted to ask is, we were talking about cutting off a whole area of the county, such as the east side, and saying we're not charging those people impact fees. Would you have to go back to the drawing board to create everything all over again if we did that? I mean, you mentioned, well, we could do it a different way, but we'd have to go all the way back and
Well, no, that's
start all over
not, it
again.
wouldn't be fair to say we have to go all the way back. What we have to do is we have to do the analysis 3 times or whatever. Now, that isn't that
Yeah.
difficult to do. I don't mean to suggest that that's a reason you wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea.
No,
Well,
but what you would have to do is those student generation multipliers, the number of students and so forth, you would see that repeated for whatever areas you were developing, and you would run those cost numbers in much the same way. Where if you simply did that and looked at the students, the houses and students in each of those areas, I suspect you would get some numbers that were fairly similar in terms of what they would generate. The question would become is, what would you be spending in that, say, east side? And you could reduce the impact fee by saying we're not spending any money there.
Yeah.
You understand this?
But-
We're not gonna use any of those impact fees at all in the east side, therefore we're not going to collect them. You'd
But
have to
they-
base it on that kind of rationale.
They would supplement funds that we would have to spend
That's
on the east side, right? I mean,
Who would
to
supplement?
getting the impact fees from the west side may go to the west side, but it's giving the district more money overall to address the problem. I mean,
But
right
you
now,
would
we're
have
not,
to spend it
we
on-
haven't had impact fees for ever.
But
And
you-
we've always provided for new capacity when it was needed, if we had the money at all. And-
But let me make clear, if you structured it in the way I just described, and you said, I actually believe that you would see that the student generation multiplier would be fairly similar no matter where you did them in the county. Now, I might be wrong when we do it that way. But there wouldn't be dramatic differences. Where the difference would become is how much you were projecting to spend in that, say, the east side. If you said we're not gonna spend any impact fees there, then you would have no impact fee to charge. It wouldn't matter what the student generation multiplier was. But you then would be you would have to spend those monies where you collected them. That's the difference, is that you lose the flexibility of being able to, being able to spend them anywhere within the county. And that's the argument that I was presenting to you, but.
Yeah.
I have two questions, actually. So, it's been referenced to 5-year strategic plan, capital plan. In that 5-year plan or 10-year plan that we have, is it predicted that we would have an increase in capacity in any school that's in the east? Mr. White? Ms. Nguyen?
Yes, we have an increase in capacity in Metcalf, which is one of our first projects out of the box with our sales tax. And I do have a chart that I can provide to you all that shows where our projected increase in capacity is located in which schools.
Okay. That was the first one. And then, thank you. Mr. Bowles, then I was wondering if you'd done any type of mapping under the, equity mapping under the HUD guidelines, where you kind of mapping opportunities and where different types of facilities.
No, I've not had any experience with that particular mapping exercise. I don't know what the data sources are to do that, but again.
Well, I was just wondering, because you were saying, trying to figure out where you would draw the line for recreation, because I guess for me, I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around us charging the same fee. Mr. Hyatt was alluding to one of the things. I'm saying, if we're saying we're charging a fee based on the impact of development, residential development on our school system, we have not seen that impact in the eastern part of the county. We've seen that impact in the northwest and southwest. And if we charge the same fee, it's like the eastern residents are subsidizing the growth that's happening in the western part of the county. And that just doesn't seem to be equitable. I mean, I don't know if anybody else sees it. So that's the reason why I was asking for your nexus, if there was only one rational nexus and the basis for which you did your analysis. You've only brought us back one thing, so it's kind of, I mean, you didn't give us much to look at. And if all the other districts that do charge it, is that the basis for how they're doing it? I don't know if there's that type of sharing of information where they do it countywide, so it makes it where the money is freer, less restricted, and you can use it wherever, but that's just a question.
I couldn't tell you for each of those counties whether they do, but I've not seen an analysis for schools that did it differently. That doesn't mean it's not out there, because I've not looked at all of those. But the basic methodology that you'll see in all of those back are essentially what we are talking about. What you're really talking about, though, is structuring the analysis the fundamentals aren't different, but you're structuring the analysis in a different way to reflect the issue you're talking about. Let me mention something that Mr. White talked about. One of the concepts on impact fees is that if you exempt them or something, then you replace the money from somebody. And in other words, the impact is still there, but you pay it through some other means. I'm just talking about generally. Example, this is not, churches don't pay impact fees for schools because they're not residential, but they do pay impact fees for roads and so forth. So if you try to exempt churches and impact fees for roads, then you have a question, well, wait a minute, they create an impact, people drive to church, and it's not a tax, so you would need to replace that from some other fund. Now, I'm not suggesting that's an example that you actually see out there, but my point only is that the impact fee is based on the actual creation of an impact and a fee charged for that purpose. So we have to constantly keep that in mind. So the way you would get around that in terms of using geographic areas, you would have to modify the amount of capital that you want to spend in an area, and then and so that the cost numbers would be redone 3 times or whatever, and each one would stand on its own in terms of the fee that you were charging based on the dollar numbers that came out of that analysis.
I'd like to see that. Anybody else up here, but I'd like to see that. It's just, for me, I mean, if there's not much difference in the price, then that's something in the cost.
What I didn't mean to suggest that there's nothing involved, but it's not something that takes several months to do. You simply have to reconstruct it. The data has to be run 3 times rather than 1 time. But again, we were set up to do that with the same financial data and so forth. So it's not 3 times the cost or anything like that, but it's not inconsequential. I don't mean to suggest that. I think the biggest issue how do we decide how to draw the lines? And that would have to be a first in type of thing. So let's understand what areas we are drawing, how we draw them, and then we run the analysis fairly quickly.
Mr. Hyatt.
Well, I have sort of going back to the line drawing and thinking, because, you know, we're always looking at East Gainesville, you know, do we need to draw a circle around Archer? And, or do we, Hawthorne? You know, and, so, you know, I think it's complicated. I think it's just to draw a line, you know, a north-south line and partition off the eastern part of the county. I think, I don't think that solves a problem in the long run at all. So that's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. Dr. McNeely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm so glad that my colleagues sitting up here all agree, basically sound like they would give a nod today, and when it comes up to the original agenda item, that we would be voting in accordance. As far as the comment that Mr. White made with county and city government, I would almost have to have a guarantee from them, something in writing that would generate, this is what will definitely happen if the board should go with the impact fees to help out the community on the east side. And I say, I'm so glad, because we never vote by districts, but we're talking about my district. And so I'm not happy with where this would hit the people and the communities on this side of town. So I'm saying up front to my colleagues that when this comes up for vote, and we've talked about line drawings, and I think Mr. Hyatt just said, then you might have to do something for Archer, you might have to do something for Hawthorne, so be it. But we know that the growth is not going to end going southwest or northwest. So we must come up with a feasible solution to help what we see as the problem impacted, if I should use that word, for eastern part of the community. I'm not, and so my colleagues already know, once this comes up, unless we have point A and point B as to what I'm saying right now, my vote is not in. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I don't know, I don't have anything else to tell. I was going to go through the
Community.
next
Just
step. It
talk.
sounds like
Ms.
you
Roy.
clearly are at a point where the next step may not be.
Mrs.
time.
Clark. Okay.
Mr. Bowles, I just have a question. I just need to clarify. It flows into this, but earlier in the presentation, when you were talking about affordable housing, you had a couple of bullet points. One talked about the cost of home had to meet federal guidelines. Then you said the homeowner, low income at the time of closing. The third piece, and maybe I just missed it somehow, I just want to clarify, you talked about a county-wide ordinance talking about low-income housing. Can you expound on that just a little bit?
Well, an exemption for the impact fees would be in the ordinance that the county would adopt for impact.
The impact fee ordinance, got it,
Actually,
okay.
In the impact fee ordinance, so you're providing an exemption, a process for exemption
Okay.
in the impact fee ordinance.
Thank you.
Now, it was I think I had said, I've just been involved with an impact fee that was approved in Santa Rosa County. It has that kind of provision in it, so, and I provided that to Brian, in terms of the language that was in that ordinance. So that's an established, but I do say that as much as, I don't think that's gonna really solve the concern that you have, because the effect of that is fairly minimal in terms of how many units and people actually qualify for it. It's very low income.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Paulson.
Yeah, just going back to the CRA, it'd be interesting, but I've been on EDAC for years. That's the Economic Development Advisory Council. And there's the city's had a CRA in the east side of Gainesville for years. And they didn't, once you get to where it becomes a county out towards East Side High School, there was no CRA. Now, we voted on it, a 5-4 vote, that's how contentious it was. And then they found out, myself and the Santa Fe Community College, be interested in, is CRA all the way out on the east side of Gainesville now. If they could work together, but it'll give you an idea how it's not, CRA is a good idea. Trouble is, it's not automatic.
Oh, it would be up to the CRA.
It'll be up to the county commission. If they take a recommendation, that recommendation changed because you had businessmen that didn't want to do it. So I'm just saying, it'd be interesting to see if that ever got done, because that was about 5 years ago.
Well, let me say that I don't know of a reason, there may be legal reasons within the CRA that you could
Well,
not
the
do
reason was they didn't
But I-
want it.
But I don't know of a reason why CRA funds could not be
Oh, no, I
used
agree, that's
to
not
offset
automatic, they're not easy to get.
an impact of the exemption. But doing that would require, that's a
Yeah, right.
much more,
That's all.
a lot of steps in that process.
This is complicated.
All right, anybody else? I thank you, Mr. Bowles. I just have one thing in closing to say is that,
The citizens, I'm sorry.
oh, I'm
Chairman.
sorry, yes, we have citizen input. Anyone like to speak to the board? Come on up.
Dr. Bowles says anybody can come, glad to get up there.
Hi, I'm Carly Simon. My background, I have a doctorate in education finance. I'm also seeking my second doctorate in design, construction, and urban planning, focusing on school facilities. I'm very excited about this discussion. First off, I grew up in this community, and I'm really surprised we don't have impact fees at this point. The amount of housing just for college students alone, this funding would be supplying quite a bit of what we're talking about. In addition, for the college student housing, these are most likely individuals that won't have students who actually contribute to our K-12 system at that time point. And so I think it's something as well to consider that there's always this tension between the university students and the K-12 students, and this actually could be something that would benefit the community by having the college student housing actually be part of supplementing K-12 education facilities. On top of that, our school I is not in the city of Gainesville, it's outside, and that we are using the sales tax facilities money. If impact fees were being charged, this school would have had additional fundings towards that. And those monies that are right now being allocated for school I could have been used in our other schools. So I think that this is something that is really important. I 100% agree with Paul White's component about the city being able to try to work along the components where we have perhaps a need to redevelop on the east side of town, because they have ways to incentivize this. Most specifically, the schools that we're talking about, the development on the west side, that is no longer the city's concern because it's not in the city boundaries anymore. So the city is going to need to incentivize other building within the city that they actually can control for. So I do think that there's ways. I agree that it would be nice to have language where the city works together. It seems like you have an excellent opportunity now that you're collaborating with the city on other initiatives, that this could be something to discuss, because this is how urban planning should work. You all have a need. The housing situation has created an enormous need for you. The city should be able to work with you to help remedy this need to make sure that both parties are happy. Again, when we talk about the affordable housing component, I do want to remind you that sales tax is a regressive tax, and it does disproportionately affect our lower income families. So that's already going on. If there's ways that we can help to make the facilities work better on the west side of town, and the cities and the communities that want to redevelop can incentivize and perhaps have a net zero as far as an impact fee and what the state or the city and community can support, I think that's something to consider. I think this is an opportunity that should have been taken a long time ago. I hope you consider it, and I think there's ways to make this work.
Thank you, Ms. Simon. Anyone else?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I'm trying to figure out how.
Can you give your name?
Oh.
We all know you.
Yvonne Henson. I'm surprised you don't have impact fees, but you often,
Still doing
yeah, you really do need them, considering what's going on out west. But like everyone is saying, there needs to be some equity in what you're doing out west versus what you're doing in the east. I was doing research. I was trying to get it to Tina Certain. She didn't understand what I was saying. So I'm just going to read it and then ask the gentleman if he's familiar with what I'm saying and how you can best fit this into your decisions. Geographic equity. Now, I got this from a HUD document online. This issue results from the fact that some areas are more costly to serve than others. This is one area where marginal cost pricing can become an element of policy making, even where the political will to charge prices based on marginal cost may not otherwise be present. An element of geographic equity is infill and redevelopment, since we often find older areas have excess infrastructure capacity, such as underutilized schools. Even where the infrastructure needs to be upgraded, the cost can be less per unit of development if infill and redevelopment is encouraged. It is difficult to presume that any developer exaction alternative by its design attempts to achieve geographic equity. The same can be said for local improvement districts. And we do have local improvement districts in Gainesville. We have empowerment zones and other areas that you might be able to use to come up with a policy if you wanted to use a zone as opposed to a line. I'm just saying, neither impact taxes nor real estate transfer taxes are sensitive to geographic equity. Only impact fees have this potential, and while not widely used to achieve this form of equity, they are becoming more common across the country. You might want to get somebody to research that for you so that you can all make a unanimous decision, because you do need impact fees out west, but you don't in the east. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bowles, do you want to respond to that?
I don't know quite how to respond to a very broad concept like that. Those are all laudable goals. I think our difficulties are if impact fees are looked at as we're looking at them here in just the context of impact fees without understanding what those broad programs might be to achieve equity and so on. It sort of stands by itself, and I think you're asking impact fees to do a great deal more than they're designed to do. They are very equitable in terms of how the fee is charged. Everybody that generates the student pays the same fee. Whether they go as far to balance equity interest in a broad nature like we're talking about, they don't do that. Could they do it in the context of a larger program and a larger initiative? Not very likely, but we don't have such an initiative within which they operate. So while I don't disagree at all with the goals or any of the goals that you're talking about here, I would simply say the impact fees are a tool that equitably raise revenue based on the rational nexus, and that's what they basically add monies into your coffers that you can use for capacity. Whether they can be part of a larger program, you'd have to understand what that program was and how they fit in, how this fit into issues that I think the lady was talking about on a much broader scale. That's another whole area of inquiry.
Yeah.
That I don't know where you would start with that in the sense that, because much of that goes to the community, as someone said, the community development policies, and how those are applied, which the building of school is only a part.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Bowles. Thank you so much for your patience and long explanations.
Coming back next week.
It says that we should have board discussion now. Is there any, we also have a meeting at 6, so I don't know.
I mean,
if
obviously, if the
anybody
board
wants
has
to
further
discuss
discussion, I would say from our standpoint, kind of what is the board's direction of where we want to proceed from here? What additional information? I mean, I have some notes written down here, but as a board, what else do you want to see? What can staff research or look and bring back? Or it doesn't sound like you have enough for what you need to take a vote on impact fees to pass a resolution at the next meeting. So the question would, I mean, unless I'm mistaken, so I just need to know what information you wish for staff to bring back prior to that time.
Okay, Dr. Paulson?
I would like to find out how many of these districts have some kind of sales tax or other way to millage or whatever they're paying for. That affected what they charge for their impact fees.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Hyatt?
I'd like to have decisions sooner rather than later. So I would be in favor of voting on something crafted from today's presentation, and I'd be in favor of that the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hyatt. I would like to, Ms. Simon mentioned the city working with us. The county also could work with us. The county is very eager for us to pass impact fees. I have been a proponent of impact fees for 15 years, and I kind of backed off when the recession hit and everybody stopped pursuing that and there wasn't any building. But it is an equitable way, and I totally agree with my colleagues up here. It seems unfair in many ways, but it is more money for the district that we wouldn't have had before. And some of those fees would be supplemented by improvements on the east side, I think. I don't know if I need any extra information other than what's been already. So, Ms. Certain, I see your lights on.
Thank you. I'm a little confused if Mr. Bowles was saying he runs the additional analysis. I am like Mr. Hyatt, I'm ready to vote now, because if there's no additional residential building in the east, there's not gonna be any fees collected in the east. And I don't see this particular operation expanding capacity in the east, because there's really not a need there, but that's, outside of Metcalf where Ms. Wynn says it is. But I'm willing to vote, but I'm also sensitive to the fact that I don't want a certain sector of the area to be subsidizing growth countywide. So that's the reason why I think if we could get additional information on a different rational nexus provided, we could, but I don't want it to delay, so I don't want it to be something where this takes Mr. Bowles 3-4 more months to get that back to us. So, I mean, if it came as an agenda item in 2 weeks, I'd vote for it.
Thank you.
Put it in place, but.
Thank you, Ms. Certain. Dr. McNeil.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've already stated my position, and I tend not to back off what I say, but I'm still wanting to see, in order for it to come up for the next board meeting, and I gave a vote, a positive vote, I would have to have that guarantee from the city and the county agency of what I stated. I don't need to repeat that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. McNeely. Any other comments? Superintendent Clark?
Okay, so I have, for further information, I understand that we have a couple of board members that are ready to make that decision sooner rather than later, but I also have the request to look at how many of these districts on here have the half-cent sales tax and how that impacts their impact fees. Potential of running the 3 concurrency areas, the additional areas, instead of just as the county-wide, but that's not gonna take 3 months. But I don't know if that it would be done in 1 week when we would have to publish the agenda for the next meeting, so it might be the meeting after that. I'm just looking to see if he can tell me kind of a time frame. I can't, would that be done in a week, or is that something we need a little, like, 2 or 3 weeks to do, is my question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how long that takes to do.
It's not something that takes a number of months. It
Okay.
can be done fairly quickly.
Okay.
When are you talking about bringing it back to the board meeting? When is that?
Well, the next board meeting is March 4th, so, but the agenda and backup material would have to be provided by next Tuesday, so I assume that 1 week would be a little soon. So then the next time frame, we would have to be able to publish that information by March 11th. So we would need it prior to March 11th.
Yeah, that could be.
Okay. All right, and then I will have, also have staff, we could reach out to the city and county manager and start that discussion from that level, and see where that takes them, like how does that work to get the city and the county gauge their interest in some sort of policy or an ordinance, and how they could support us in the affordable housing piece. So I think I've captured everything, and if I've missed something, please let me know and we'll.
Mr. Moore has a comment.
Just in terms of directing Mr. Bowles and to what to get for additional information, I know we mentioned the 3 elementary concurrency areas, but since this is a elementary, middle, and high school area, and kind of targeting the massive growth that we have in southwest Gainesville, would then also potentially bring Archer and Newberry into that same area, because they're all part of the same concurrency area. I was just wondering if maybe the board would like Mr. Bowles to look at the 6 high school concurrency areas. Those are not the zoned area, they're not the same as the current boundary lines, but there's, the entire Newberry area, which is Archer and Newberry, the Santa Fe area of High Springs and Alachua. There's the Hawthorne area, which is the entire eastern third of Alachua County, Gainesville High, which is kind of right in the middle, East Side, which is kind of the next kind of quarter of Alachua County, and then Buchholz, which is most of southwest Gainesville along the I-75 corridor. That gives you kind of 6 different areas where if you did try to look at sections within the county, you're not going to have to lump Archer in with Tower Road and things like that.
I like that of looking at the, not just the elementary level, I think we should look at all of them, all the school levels.
And that just gives him a map to use where he doesn't have to arbitrarily come up with 6 or 5 or 3 new zones. We have the high school concurrency areas. The middle school ones could also be used, but I think there's 7 of those. But it just, that way he doesn't have to figure out what you meant when you said targeting areas. Those are already drawn, and he could just use those as the map lines.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Anything else?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's
okay.
right.
Well, I think my final comment is we need to consider thoughtfully what's in the best interest of the children of this district and the district as of right now. It's very, easy to say what the school board should have done 20 years ago, unless you believe Facebook. I haven't been on the board 20 years. We had a meeting with the county commission. I think this was 2 or 3 years ago, and it's very much like blaming this county commission for the road situation. So what I want to focus not on what should have been done or shouldn't have been done and assign blame, but let's look at what can we do now, what's the best way to move forward, and so that was it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt.
Since we're having board discussion, can I ask one question? It was before I was elected, and current Commissioner Byerly was there. He asked if there was anything that the county could do to help us with
Yes,
this.
he did.
Is there anything the county can do? Because no one answered this question when he asked that, when he posed that. Is there something the county can do? Mr. White mentioned that this is a land use issue.
He said,
Um,
didn't he say something, he would, if we would vote for impact fees, he'd be willing to pay me some
that's
kind of.
not this last joint
Oh,
meeting.
not the last
This was in the previous, I think it was last year, it was before I came on the board. And
I
he
see.
asked that, he says, what is it, if you all need, if the board needs time to kind of catch up with the growth, because there's so much growth out there, what is it that we can do? What can the county do to help you all with this right here? And no one gave any feedback to him. I don't know, not in that public meeting. I don't know what was sent to the county outside of that meeting, but, so I'm asking now, what is it that we would want? I mean, it's come up here with asking them for CRA to pay for fees in the eastern quadrant or whatever. But in the west, how can they help us? What can the county do to help us deal with the dilemma that we're in?
Well,
with the growth going that way.
Madam Chair, and I'm sure that Ms. Hurd is aware of this, is that in our last joint meeting, Commissioner Byerly said that, and of course, no one commissioner, just like no one school board member, can say what's gonna happen, but he said he would advocate for the commission to pick up the tab for all of the ASO officers. And again, you know, Dr. McNeely is saying, well, she wants a guarantee on that other thing. I don't think anybody can guarantee us this, but Commissioner Byerly, I believe everybody remembers that, and that was in a public meeting.
Does that include the hand soap?
And the big hat.
So does
So,
that help with our issue, our capacity issue, and the capital issue? That's what I'm asking. We're saying that's what we would ask them to do to cover the excess fee that we don't get from the state with ASO. That's something that they could do to help us? That's the line we're taking?
No, that's it.
I'm asking.
That's not my idea, that's Commissioner Byerly's idea.
I heard that, but I'm saying he asked us from us, for, the board, what was our suggestion, so I'm asking, that's the question I'm posing to us now. What could the county do to help us with these capacity issues, the crunch that we're in certain areas?
We could certainly ask them what they would be willing to do, because, that was a totally unreasonable offer Commissioner Byerly made to pay for the ASO officers in exchange for us passing impact fees. It just showed how eager they are to get impact fees passed, but I think we could ask them to what they might be able to do for the east side, if we passed it countywide and have a guarantee. The reason nobody gave him any suggestion all those years ago before you were on the board is the board wasn't generally at the time in favor of impact fees. I can remember when 4 members of the board were not in favor of impact fees.
Madam Chair.
So, yes, ma'am.
I'd like to comment to both colleagues, but I wanted to address it to Attorney Delaney. How is it, because we leave here still without a recommendation? I don't want to ask them, what can you do? I want to be able to tell them what they need to consider. So is there any way that we can talk about that? I know our time is up today because we're getting ready to go into board meeting, but we must have a means for conversation in order to direct staff or Mr. Bowl, whoever is going to be approaching that agency. How can we do that?
Sure. I think 2 ways. I think board members can provide direction to the superintendent right now, or the next time we talk about this, or even individually, of these are specific things that we would be looking for the county to do were we to pass that. And the superintendent can collect that information and have staff present it to the county. That would be probably the primary way to do that. The other way would be to have another workshop where we discuss this further, and staff comes back with some recommendations after they've had time to kind of look it over and say, hey, these are things, this, and this, that we would propose that we present to the county. Is that acceptable to the board? So it could come top down from the board to the superintendent, or the superintendent could have staff develop a list of asks.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Just one other thing to add to what David just said. You all will be adopting a resolution as well, lots of whereas clauses. You can specifically state within your resolution, whereas the school board does not wish to affect low-cost family housing or impede growth in areas that need growth, whatever the language would be. A lot of that could be spelled out, and whereas the school board will ask the county to take every possible measure to prevent impact fees from hurting growth where growth is desired or hurting low-income families, you can put a lot of strong language in the resolution itself, too.
That's a good point. All right, there's nothing else. This meeting is adjourned.